Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Legion, Season 2, Episode 5. It's called Chapter 13. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always.
You're so going to trip up on that.
No, I'm not. I went fine.
No, nearly.
Went fine. So, yeah, we got a Legion episode, and this was very focused. There's two sort of plot threads that are going, but they ultimately become one by the time we get to the end.
Yep.
And we have Lenny back, and the episode is largely about that. She's in this very fancy interrogation room.
It is fancy, isn't it?
It's upside down, but they have like gravity shifters in it, so that it's fine when you're in there. But they're actually on the ceiling, and the window at the ceiling of the floor, I guess, of the room is actually a window looking down at the city.
Yeah.
It's
pretty unnerving.
It's pretty trippy. Yeah. Again, some things aren't what they appear because you're upside down. Before we get into else,
should we start with the infomercial?
that's what I was going to do. Yeah, start with the infomercial. John Hamm's back, giving his mysteries and intriguing
dropping
conundrums.
bombshells on this one potentially.
Potentially. So we are creatures of pattern. We recognise patterns. It's something we've done since caveman times to recognise what is safe and what is not. But we still do it. And
it goes on, the whole toast, Jesus in your toast and all that.
Yeah, so that was the examples that were used at first. And then it sort of goes into, sometimes if a piece of information doesn't jive with what we think the rest of it means, our brains will just discard it.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, all right. I'll pay attention. And ultimately the point is, so sometimes when we see coincidence, we actually see conspiracy.
Yeah. We create the pattern because we're looking for it. It makes sense to us, even though we might be stretching and just things are just happening.
So I have a new theory.
Oh, bold statement after that.
I have a new theory. That David's not the one who causes the apocalypse or the plague, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's just his body that causes the apocalypse. But it's not David who's controlling his body, it's Farouk, who's secretly this whole time. Because I think, here's my thing, I think the reason why Future Sid, who's, at least assuming I'm right about this, is actually Future Sid.
Okay.
The reason why she tells him to help him find his body is because if he finds his real body, he won't have to hijack David's. And it's hijacking David's that makes him more powerful, and therefore he causes all this. Whether it's intentional or by accident is up to your...
Yeah, find the real body and you can kill it.
Yes.
Okay.
And given that because obviously one of the questions you may have about Lenny in this episode is like, well, her body was in a wall, right?
Yeah, it was.
We saw that. As she puts it, her ass was in one room and her tits were in another. That is the exact phrasing as to how she put it. And it's like, okay, so how are you here? And they ask this question. Clark comes in, tries to do his interrogation bit. Doesn't go very well. She's very cryptic and just like, I want to see David. I want to see David. You get any drugs? I want to see David. That's basically the gist of the scene.
Much.
How do we pronounce epitome? Petonomy. There you go. I was going to say Petomy again. Petonomy. Yeah. So he comes in. He tries to do it, and she's like, "Oh, you remember everything, right? You remember everything." And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "What color are my eyes?" And she's she's covering her eyes. She's like, well, brown.
Yeah, he closes his eyes as I think back.
Yeah. It's like, "Oh, they're brown," and she opens her eyes and he's like, "Wait, they're green, but they were brown. I'm not wrong."
And she agrees. She's like, "No, they were, but they're not now."
Yeah, and he tries to go into her head for memories. There's actually some shots of like flowers falling on the floor with blood, which comes up later. That's actually from a separate thing. But he gets very angry, very violent during this scene. It all gets very heated. As we see, Lenny's like grandmother, who like sort of started her drinking at like the age of 8 or whatever she was when she's sitting on the couch. Yeah. So you're getting windows into her life, but again, it goes pretty poor. It doesn't work. So ultimately, David does go in. Lenny, she looks up and David's there.
Yeah, just it seemingly appears.
Yeah, and he tries to talk to her, and he's a bit more
responsive.
responsive, yeah, but he's a lot more friendly with her. You know, if there's a Twizzler, it's like, you know, he's kind of joking about things as he's talking to her. He's kind of friendly.
He will communicate. You know, whereas
Yeah.
you know Clark is no silence until you answer what I say. Yeah, Ptolemy is a bit more like, okay, but I'm not really sure what's going on. But it's still very one-sided. Whereas this is, you know, okay, we can have a conversation.
And he keeps on, and eventually he freaks out though because he looks into her head. Because obviously she kind of admits, you know, I'm not working for the Shadow King, but I'm not working for him. It's not really my. I'm here to tell you that he's finding his body, and you know he's there. And he gets this glimpse, and David like he stands back up abruptly. And we get this brief glimpse of like a childhood memory. And I don't want to say I called anything, but I did recognise what it was. I remembered it from season 1. I remember that this was David and his sister from season 1. Amy, of course, who was a relatively recurring character in season 1.
And that was the point out where it did cross my mind. I was like, but how?
Yeah. And I wasn't sure where they were going with this exactly, but I recognised that was like the childhood memory of David and his sister when they were kids. I remember seeing that in season 1. And I was like, that was weird. What's going on now? I'm not sure if I'm following this. And, you know, the scene keeps going. And, of course, as all this is playing out, we're intercutting with Oliver and Farouk. Obviously, I mean, to everyone else, it's just Oliver. But Farouk's in his head, so we see him with them in the car, riding along. And they kind of debate about various things. They're talking about going to get the body. We see them digging it up. We see they've got a device that they stole from Division 3.
They have a real interesting discussion on the morality of killing.
Yeah, they have different opinions here where Farouk's very much, a lion doesn't question the morality of killing a deer. We're superior to them. We don't have to,
right? And there's a point where Oliver kind of justifies it to himself, where he talks, you know, how all of us, you know, everything around us is, you know, it's all, you know, atoms that have existed since the dawn of the universe. They were stars once that died, and now they're here. So the concept of death doesn't really exist because the atoms live on.
A very impersonal way of looking at things.
Yeah. There's a logic to what he's saying, but it feels like he's trying to just convince himself, doesn't it? Like he's trying to go, well, I suppose.
Yeah, because
really
I mean,
matter.
It's not too long after that where he turns around and says, "Oh, by the way, I am going to kill you."
Yeah.
And Farouk kind of laughs that off, and he's trying to like ask him later on, "Oh, how are you going to do it? Give me a hint." He's like, "I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to see it coming, but you'll realize what it is at the moment of impact, at the moment of death, and it'll be too late." He's like, "Give me a hint." He's like, "Okay, I'll give you a mathematical question. What is 1 + 1?" And he's like, 2. He's like, And, you know, he just kind of laughs at him. He's like, "Oh, you're playing games. You're very coy." I had an inkling of a feeling when he said this 1 + 1 thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is almost baseless. I'm just thinking, if the answer's not 2, right? Because obviously in math, 1 + 1 = 2. The only other answer I can think of that could somehow make sense, it can maybe be used against them in somehow, is that 1 + 1 = 3. And by that I mean birth. I mean 2 people making a new baby. So 1 + 1 = 3. And I don't know if that means that like Farouk's got a descendant that can do something, or if he means that they'll get David back because David's actually made Sid pregnant, and I mean, even though he can't because they don't physically do anything. But, you know, I'm not saying I've thought all this through. I'm saying when he said 1 + 1, the only other answer I could think of that made sense in my head was like a couple having a kid. 1 + 1 = 3.
I will say we've spoke a lot about perception this season.
Yes.
So
yes.
1 + 1, you should, that is 2. But what if I convince you that it's not? What if I make you perceive it as something else?
Oh yeah, it could be a misdirection. Yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah. Also, just Ptolemy, to go back to him, more of the evil chicken.
The delusion creature.
Delusion creature. You know, we see his ear bleeding again. We get a flashback of it going in his ear. Most importantly, when he's inside Lenny's head, it's like this nightmare. Again, this links up to something later, but sees Basket Man.
Yeah.
And Vermilion, and they're around, and it's all very ominous. And then the camera almost goes inside the basket, and instead of a person, it's like the black chicken thing, but like that head big. That's what I think it was supposed to be. I'm not
Yeah, I think so.
Because at first I thought it's kind of dinosaur head looking, but then birds and dinosaurs are kind of similar.
I think it's the idea that it's grown, it's bigger.
Yeah.
That was the whole point. The delusion spreads and it grows.
Yeah. So well worth mentioning is that it's a creepy ass moment. I'm not sure how to read into it so much yet.
No, I was thinking maybe this is part of the spreading of the delusion. It's in his mind, right? We know that because it went into his ear, and then he's connecting with these other people. He's going into their minds, and it's almost like an infection.
Assuming it comes from him inside there, yeah, sure.
Yes, assuming that.
Yeah, that makes some sense, because later on, of course, we get to because we see Farouk and Oliver get up a body, and here's the thing: when Farouk holds up the hand, I was like, "That's not his. That hand's much smaller than his. That's a woman's hand."
Yeah.
Right.
So I just to go back and say, I just had a thought. As the infomercial, we're saying, "Oh, it's the delusion spreading. It's a what if it's just a coincidence? They both, two people have the same idea."
That's assuming it's not coming from him.
Yes. Yeah. So you could read it either way.
Because you could read that he's in the memory, and it's his delusion that puts that into the memory as the evil bird inside the basket.
Yeah, he's projected it, essentially.
Yeah. Because was that in the original dream? Who had it? Because we find out who had this dream later on, and what he's actually getting from it. Because David sees a glimpse of the childhood, Ptolemy sees a glimpse of this dream. We find out where this memory and the dream came from, and it's the person whose body that Lenny's sort of taken over, if you will.
Yes.
More on that in a bit. So they dig out the body, they use their fancy device on it, and then they follow the what was it, the donut car? Yeah, donut submarine.
Donut submarine car.
Sometimes this show has really weird things just randomly, and this was one of these things where I'm like, donut submarine?
Yeah, there's a point where he's like, "Yeah, see, told you there'd be a submarine." I'm like, I mean, yeah, sure, but what?
But it leads them to the house where seemingly Amy, David's sister, is being protected by guards. I was thrown a little bit because they recast her husband. I did not recognise him at all, and I was like, "Who's this asshole? He didn't look like her husband." I was confused. He's just been recast. That's all it was.
That explains. I just assumed I didn't remember because it's been a year.
But yeah, so that was the thing. So, and she's like, she's got these the flowers, and I'm like, "Oh, that's the flowers from earlier that we saw falling." Like, I remembered that, and he's talking about how he feels this this sense of dread.
And you've got the fan going in the windows.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, behind them, the guards who are the armed guards who are around the premises, kind of like guarding. They disappeared. She points that out, and then Oliver, and there's no Farouk because to everyone else, because whenever it's just them on their own, we see Farouk because it's kind of all in their head or all in Oliver's head. But because we're seeing it from the perspective of real people, there's no Farouk. It's just Oliver because that's what it looks like to them.
And I think before she shows up, she shares with him that she was, she's been having this recurring dream anyway, and she says, "Oh, but I had it during the day today." And he goes, "Oh, so you had a nap?" And she's just like really confused about that.
Yeah, and she ultimately goes, "Yeah, I guess I had a nap," but it doesn't sound like she actually did have a nap.
It didn't, did it? It sounds like she had this dream just randomly while awake in the middle of the day.
And the dream, of course, is that she's a Vermilion. She's got the hair and the mustache, and there's a basket, man.
Yeah, I thought what was particularly interesting is, she didn't say her voice. She said, "Oh, my voice." She didn't say it was robotic. She said it was music.
Yes, it was singing.
Yeah, and she sings a bit of the song, but I thought it was particularly interesting because we've always heard them as this robotic sound, right?
Mm-hmm. And I suppose arguably singing is the polar opposite of a robotic sound, because a robotic's very monotone, it's very by the numbers, it's just the facts of what's coming out, whereas singing is very expressive. It's all in the it's made up noises you're doing to sort of give it some emotion, essentially.
Yeah, so, definitely.
So there's something there to be said about that. And I'm like, okay, right, so that's what we saw with Ptolemy earlier. We saw this dream, it was in her head. And this all makes sense once what happens is that he comes in, he makes her float on the table, and he uses this gun, and basically this device, whatever it is, has taken, it sort of read the corpse of Lenny, her body, and then morphed David's sister into it, and then Farouk has put her mind into it. So it is, it's Lenny's mind in the body, and
it is. Yeah.
It seems like his sister's sort of in a back door somewhere because the memories are still there to be accessed in some way.
Right, but are they just there and that's it? Is this was this a one-way thing?
Yeah, can it be reversed? Certainly, it's a very heartbreaking scene. It's definitely, I was enjoying the episode. All the stuff in the interrogation room was good. Farouk and Oliver are such good speakers. The dialogue's really fun and to listen to, and bounce back and forth. But it's this last 5 minutes when David's realising what's happened, that he's realised that Lenny's body, so his sister's been morphed into her. His sister's essentially dead.
Right.
And that's the hints early on, is that both David and Ptolemy, when they try to look into her head, they get glimpses of the sister's memories and dreams, not of Lenny's. But it's Lenny that's in there, and that's why she's got different eyes, because Amy had green eyes.
Yeah, but you know, all of Lenny's memories are in there as well. You know,
Yeah,
she
sure.
is there.
Yeah, she's the main one. She's in control. She's the
But that's why it's not just this recreation. It is her.
Oh, it's her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Purposes.
Yeah, Farouk had her head in his head and put it in there. You know, it's
and
her.
It's been Amy was basically overwritten with Lenny.
Yeah, that's what I'm putting.
So it's be really interesting. I don't know if they can reverse it, but if they can, Lenny's probably gonna want to go because she's pretty selfish, right?
Yeah, unless they do an arc with her where she does ultimately like grow to make that selfless decision. But I mean,
maybe,
I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily seem like the way to go with her yet.
I mean, you could do it, and you know, given enough time to do this properly, I will believe it. But I don't know if that's necessarily the most interesting thing to do with her.
I want to talk about two shots that I loved during all this. One was Farouk in the eye of Oliver as he was actually doing the thing with the device, and the other one was when he's like standing behind the blinds, and you kind of realise that this is all part of his master plan. Like he's arranged all this. This was all to cause David pain. Like he did this and then sent her to him, so that
so that he would learn this,
so that he would figure it out, and not just tell him outright, just like figure it out slowly, you know. And he's just, he's crying. We end the episode with David just in tears and screaming. Like, that's how we end the episode. And I'm like, that's just kind of how I got to the idea of that. No, he really just wants David's body. Like, his body's probably not useful anymore.
Oh, that's fair. I think the problem is his body is. It's not that it's not useful. It's that it's. You know, he left it behind for a reason at this point, right? He's like, well, it's a threat, essentially. You know, they can kill the body and kill him.
Well, no, wait, did he leave it behind?
No, I know he was taken out of it, but I think at that point he has made the decision to leave it behind because, he's come to the realization that he can be killed while in the body. Whereas if they're just protecting the body because they think, oh, let's lock it away, that's almost for the best for him.
I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's. I mean, maybe that'll be part of it. I don't think it's necessarily anything to do with how he feels about his body. I think it's more that David's mind has actually got more potential. I think he sees David as being a way to become more powerful.
Well, that's fair.
And if he on top of that can, I mean, that's why he like stuck with them all this time. I mean, he says it was awful being stuck inside the kid's head and all that. But I think ultimately the reason why he stuck around and didn't bounce to anyone else is because he could feed off this. He can amplify his own power. And it's maybe him getting David's body that leads to the plague and the everything that happens in the future. So
it tracks.
But again, every single one of these infomercials has taught us not to trust anything we are seeing or saying, and anything could be the opposite of what we're doing or saying.
Yeah, we got to this infomercial, this episode, and I went, "What's the point in us even doing this? Because what's the point in theorizing when this is saying, hey, don't bother, you're wrong."
Because it makes me think, what have we discarded to make a pattern?
Right, and I don't know now because I've discarded it. It's not in my brain anymore. It's not in my memory as easily.
And are all the infomercials still completely valid? Were they only relevant to their own episode? Does red still mean green? Green still mean red? Does,
I think, here's the thing that I'm going to make a pattern out of. Because the fact that we keep seeing the delusion creature outside of that episode means that one was relevant beyond that episode. So my assumption would be that the others are as well. Which is, I think that's why we always assume that, right?
Yes.
Is that carried over? But now I'm going, well, is that just a pattern that I'm making up? Like, have I just created that and they're not relevant? Oh, I hate this show.
Damn it, Holly. What have you done to us? Legion, episode 5, season 2. We're halfway through the season.
God damn it. We're halfway through and I have no idea what to think anymore.
Yeah. So, interesting that we actually didn't see a lot of characters this episode. It was just in the interrogation room and then Oliver and Farouk and the other stuff.
Yes.
So there was no Sid. There was one brief glimpse of Melanie in Oliver's head. Basically, when
almost remembered her.
It's actually when he's trying to convince himself even that he's that nothing matters and death has no meaning. And it's during that whole speech that he sees Melanie in his head. And it's almost like he's becoming to Inhuman, and then he remembers her, and he's like, "Oh no, wait!
It's
There's a reason why life
attachment
matters.
to life.
Yeah, life actually does matter. Here's a reason why it matters: is the person I love." So they're still playing with things like that. But that's our read of this episode as best as we can do it. When they're constantly telling us not to trust anything they're saying,
it's really hard, isn't it?
let us know what your theories are on this episode of Legion. Like and subscribe. Get us on patreon.com/MelFuzzTV if you want to support the channel. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?